Nathan, it's nice to have you here. Thanks for coming along. Just why don't you give us a quick intro to you?
Yep. So thanks for having me, Scott. So Nathan Beaver, founder of Beaver Agriculture. We're on a mission to transition the UK to a more sustainable and secure future of food. We're going to do that through a network of AI-enabled, high-yielding plant factories located around major customer distribution hubs in the UK.
So it sounds like farming to me. Was there farming in your blood? That's something that led you here?
Yeah, no, not a farmer, not an agronomist. My background is in technology. My background is in manufacturing, and my background is in sustainability. So I've approached this problem with none, I guess, of your traditional skills, but I've approached it with a different set of skills. And that's why we think about it as manufacturing and why we think about our sites as factories rather than necessarily farms in a traditional sense.
So a plant factory.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I still can't take away the vision in my head of like this kind of vertical farm. Is it a vertical farm? And kind of maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You're very specific about plant factory.
Yeah.
But in that journey to where you are now, I mean, what led you to this solution? Is there an aha moment specifically that you found?
I think a couple of the big things that really led me to this moment was I spent a number of years working at KPMG in the space of sustainability, so helping clients, understand how they can, take carbon out of their business, reduce their plastic exposure, think about materials differently in how they manufacture. And the whole vertical farming, indoor agriculture space has always been an interest because ultimately we have to grow food differently than the way we currently do. And it was in about April 2023, I went down a rabbit hole and was looking at all the vertical farms across the globe. One's going on in the US, in the Middle East, Germany, Australia, Japan, Korea. And kind of what I quickly realized is they're all doing it exactly the same way. And so part of me was going, okay, well, kind of why are they all doing it the same way? What approach they're taking? What yield is this generating for them? And what I realized for me that moment coming out of the rabbit hole was that they were all doing exactly the same thing in the wrong way. And they were all essentially scaling an inefficient way of growing a plant. And so back down the rabbit hole I went, ripped apart, rethought completely differently around the problem, and approached this through a manufacturing and technology lens, which for me then shifted the economics of the business model and really brought to light the opportunity to not only think differently and do differently about manufacturing and creating products, but allowed me to kind of found a business which is making a difference. As a father of two young boys, knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, we have to make a change. And finally, the water problem, the water challenge we face globally is huge. We have freshwater challenges even in the UK. As a Yorkshireman, it's now October and there's still a hose pipe ban in Yorkshire, which just is mind-boggling. So the ability to be able to grow plants, manufacture plants, deliver plants to the market that use 90% less water per kilo is a huge benefit to everybody.
So I understand it's not necessarily vertical farming, it's indoor agriculture. But I think, you do have this concept of vertical farming that kind of sits alongside what you're doing.
Yeah.
It still seems like a very nascent area. Are there many vertical farms around that you're competing against, or is this really very new?
So vertical farming, there's a number in the UK, there's a number globally. For me, I don't think about it as competing with UK domestic vertical farms. In the UK, we import more than 45% of the food into the UK. Our challenge as a UK PLC is ultimately how can we become more self-sustaining around the food that we need. And so for me, what I am looking at is how I compete with the import market, how I can take carbon miles out of the food chain, how I can take pesticides out of the food chain, how can I ensure that the product that ends up on your door ultimately has gone from farm to fork in less than 60, 70 miles. That benefit to you as a consumer means that you've got something fresh, healthy, and local on your table. It means that you can feel good about eating something that's green and is green as well at the same time.
So not necessarily competing against the UK market, but you're competing against the import, and it would be, I'd guess, these farmers who are farming things in fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're competing against that, what kind of benefits do you bring to your target audiences? And actually, on that, I mean, your target audiences are obviously consumers.
Yeah.
But who else do you put in that bucket that you're trying to deliver to?
So versus a traditional open field farm, we use 90% less water. We use more than 75% less fertilizer, which is obviously a huge carbon impact as well. We use no pesticides. So the product that arrives ultimately on your plate, you wash it, it's ready to eat after that point, but has had no pesticides in its manufacturing. We are able to produce locally. So we use 95% fewer carbon miles because it's not being flown in from Israel, Kenya, Morocco. It's not being trucked in from southern Spain, France, Italy, the Netherlands. So all of these environmental and sustainability benefits means that you get a cleaner product. For the customer or the consumer or the government, who are really the main kind of three stakeholders in the market. So for you, the consumer, it means that you're getting a healthier, cleaner product on your plate. And why do you care? Because 52% of consumers now consider sustainability as part of their buying decisions. So when people are at the shelf and at the till, how green and clean that product is now is becoming a major factor as part of your buying decision. And more than a third are worried about availability of product on shelf. So we saw that with recent Food Standards Agency report, 36% of consumers worried. So from a consumer perspective, you want a cleaner, greener product, and you want that on your shelf. And that's the aim of what we're here in ultimately in the business to do. The customers, who are the retailers, the wholesalers, the food processors, for them, what they're really looking for is the security of supply, knowing that they will constantly have that product available, whether it is to support the manufacturing of their kind of pre-cooked ingredient, their pre-packaged sandwich, or as a retailer, that availability on shelf. And what they're also looking for is a product that delivers them carbon benefits. Most of the major supermarkets have declared ambitions around reducing their food, land, and agricultural carbon emissions. For one of the major supermarkets, that's more than 35%. So that need to drive down emissions requires them to engage with suppliers that think, act, and do differently than has traditionally been the case. And then round us all, we've got government. Government, as we all know, have set themselves ambitious targets on carbon reduction. But the government also has a role to play around helping ensure and drive food security in the UK, and ensuring that, as our population continues to grow, more than 72 million by 2030, that we have enough food to feed the mouths that ultimately we'll have in the UK.
When you talked about going down your rabbit hole, you talked about seeing how everybody else was doing it.
Yeah.
I guess you've taken a different approach to doing this. Can you tell us kind of how that is from maybe both the commercial side, but also the technology side?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of things three things that we do differently, really. So number one is we focus on the economics. So for me, this is still a relatively new area. It's a relatively new business model versus obviously traditional farming. And therefore, what we do is we only grow what works in the economics of the business model. So that means that we don't grow what you might traditionally call more of a commodity product. So things like coriander, parsley, iceberg lettuce, romaine, the things that you would see on the bottom shelf in the supermarket. Instead, we grow what would be called value-add lettuce. We grow certain herb categories, and we grow microgreens because the economics of those products work in controlled environment agriculture where it is today. The second thing that we do differently is we think about the optimization and the use of space. So we have our proprietary grow modules, which allow us to be able to deliver more yield per square meter than traditional open field farming, but also more yield per square meter than traditional and current vertical farming techniques, which combined with the products allows us to really shift the economics. And then we factor in the third point, which is we take a capex-light approach. The whole business is thought and built around the principle of scalability. It's all built around the principle of off-the-shelf components, which means that we're not getting lumbered with a large capex bill and a large opex bill like others that have entered this sector have been left with. And it allows us to scale faster and also ongoingly reduce that cost of maintenance and day-to-day improvement in the facility.
The idea of off-the-shelf components sounds like a really important thing there.
Yeah.
I mean, could I actually pop into a high street store and buy these pieces and make it myself? I mean, how does that work?
Pretty much. Or a friend in China who can supply them in bulk. But we wanted to make sure that it wasn't about the customization and the personalization. It was more about how you brought it all together to drive that efficiency and effectiveness. Because, I guess to my earlier point, many have invested huge amounts of money in capital, automation, robotics, different ways of doing things, which haven't succeeded and haven't worked. And so many have struggled, and some have, no longer in business because they've been left with a capex bill and opex bill. For us, it's about deploying really kind of off-the-shelf components, but only also deploying capital that works. We want it proven. We want to know it executes before we would then deploy, and ultimately a business case stacks up for it.
We've spoken with, within the Impact Builder, we've spoken with a number of companies that are working on that kind of production side of things. Data always seems to be key. I'm sure data is a massive thing for you, right?
Yeah. Data is, for me, data is the answer to how we transition to a more sustainable, responsible, and resilient future. Data tells us, where is the carbon opportunity? Where is the waste reduction opportunity? Where is the water reduction opportunity, the different materials opportunity in whichever sector that you are in? And for us, data is ultimately what's going to drive an even better improvement and performance in the business. In a volume-based business, which is what we are, producing food, data allows us to drive out marginal gains. It's the overused cliche, but it's absolutely true. It allows us to drive marginal gains in yield. It allows us to drive marginal gains in cost reduction, but also it allows us to drive strategically the direction of the business. And so part of our growth now is not just about building more plant factories than the one that we've currently got opened, but it's about harnessing the power of the data that we are creating in order to drive that marginal execution.
Okay, so you mentioned the plant factory you've got open.
Yeah.
I mean, are these factories that you're building in town centres, or where are you building them?
So we've got our first one open in Milton Keynes. We took the keys to that in June last year. That's 23. 24. And then what we've been focused on there is building and standing up that facility. We've launched and been up and running for about 2 months now, and we will be at 2 tons of capacity by the time that we're fully open and operational. Our plan now is to then open multiple factories, but only based around customer distribution hubs. This principle of growing food in city centres right next to the consumer, I think, is great in theory, but doesn't work in practical economic sense, because the rental rate per square foot of space in a town centre is much more expensive than it is on a distribution centre on the edge of a major city. And that's our focus, those major distribution centres that allow us ultimately to open our back door, send that product 5-10 miles max to our customer's back door, injected straight into their pre-existing supply chain, and then it's out into the market. Further reduces the carbon miles, but from a consumer perspective, makes you have an even fresher product on shelf available to you, whichever store that you go in.
And I guess as well, so the question is, where do you see the growth? Probably a pun in this conversation, but where do you see the growth? And how do you see that manifesting in terms of how consumers will get access to your products as well?
Yeah, so for us today, we are focused on primarily the wholesale and the food service market. Our expansion takes us into food processing and also into retail. From a product perspective, you as a consumer then will see our product either on a plate at work or a plate at an event or a plate at a conference as part of a catering or food services business. And in the future, you'll see our product on shelf either under our own brand or under a white label brand. We then see expansion in two ways. Not only more plant factories in the UK and internationally, but we also see expansion into vine-based product as well. The UK market today in leafy greens is more than 250,000 tons a year. So there's a huge opportunity in leafy greens that we'll continue to exploit. But the expansion into vine-based product will be the next kind of category that we would look to go into. And then we will take that same mindset and model into it. How can we build plant factories that focus on the economics, that focus only on growing what would work in that business model, that drives an efficiency in the utilization of space, and is also a capex-light approach? How do we use off-the-shelf components to grow strawberries, tomatoes, passion fruits, and those that work within the economics?
So, roll the clock on 5 years. Mm-hmm. What would you like to see? How would Beaver Agriculture look in 5 years for you?
So for me, we would be at our network of 4 plant factories across the UK. We would be supporting probably more than 2/3 of the UK's population in terms of our ability to reach them from our locations. And then for me, it would be then really that question of going, well, how do we accelerate to 10 factories? How do we shift and move internationally? And how do we increase that expansion into vine-based category and then potentially other categories as well?
Yeah, really interesting. Now, the surprise question for every interview.
Yeah.
If there was something that I could have asked but haven't asked, is there a question that you would want me to ask? And if not, then wave a magic wand and tell me what you'd like to change overnight to make this really accelerate.
So I've gone down a rabbit hole and now I've got a magic wand. I think that for me, the bit I would like to be magic wand and have already is all of the depth of the data. We're collecting data. We have data. It's hugely insightful in terms of helping guide what we are doing, but more data will help us accelerate the ability to produce an even more cost-effective product for the market. And that for me is the ultimate goal, because consumers, we are inherently lazy. We want the brands and we want the businesses to take away the problems for us. And we will do that if you can make the economics stack up. If you can give me a product that is roughly the same price as that traditional browner product, I will shift my behavior and I will buy that. We're seeing it in cars already with EVs now the same price as ICE engines. We're seeing it across multiple sectors. We need to see that across food. And if we do that, the consumer benefits and UK as a whole benefits from it.
That's brilliant, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really nice to have you here. Good luck.
Thank you.